So, I'm just going to say some of the ideas that are on my mind these days and just express them and share them. Around what is peace and why so much war and why so much complaint in the world about all the things that are going on, and the state of confusion that we're all in as to how to resolve the world's problems. And what I've been looking into is about oxytocin. So oxytocin is just a word to me, but it's a word that means a chemical, and that chemical is associated with love. So oxytocin, as far as I knew, is the chemical that's released when a mother is bonding with her newborn baby. And it's the love chemical, is what's commonly thought. So it's the feeling of euphoria and total at peace and in love feeling that we have around a newborn baby, for example, where there's total innocence. And those babies grow up to be people, and those people somehow lose their innocence and become guilty. And we judge. We judge behaviors, and we judge ourselves, and we judge other people. And we all have self-judgments which we may deny in a conflict in our own mind. And likely as not, if we're denying something inside in ourselves, we'll see it outside of ourselves, and it will really stand out to us. And one can hate things outside of oneself and not see the hypocrisy that I also do those things. And this thing about oxytocin, anyway, came to me, is an understanding that oxytocin is also what dogs have that make a dog love its owner and be able to recognize the owner's family. So a dog will protect the household and will not bite those kids, even when those kids are play fighting and stuff like that, and the dog may well be thinking, oh, I've got to intervene, but something's going on in the dog where he's recognizing, no, I don't have to intervene here, this is my family, I can trust them. Whereas if somebody comes to the door with aggression, the dog will start barking at that person and even bite and savage that person in order to defend the dog's human family. And it turns out it's oxytocin is the main factor at play there. And it took me a little while to get my head around this. But yeah, so love, we think love is unconditional love. Whereas we also have love for someone which can turn to hate. Conditions change. You go from the condition of a loving family couple, and the couple fall out with each other and can fall into hating each other. So where there was total trust and forgiveness of that person, it becomes a judgment of that person that that person is somehow a threat. So under the circumstances of threat, oxytocin sends signals to the amygdala, which is to do with fight or flight. And it sends a signal that I must protect what I love. So the very same chemical that induces love is the same chemical that can induce protection of what I love, which is seeing someone else as a threat, which is therefore fight that person or flight away from that person. To me, that's quite fascinating. So people who are in love and sharing the oxytocin bond can fall out of love and go to the extreme of hating and murdering each other. And just trying to understand that there are chemicals working away in our bodies which are actually making loads of decisions which we then stand by as if that's my decision. And those different chemicals acting in different ways at different times, when one is in a heightened state of fear to the point where the heartbeat has gone extremely fast and images of threat are coming up in one's mind, and the inner images of what happened to me in the past that was threatening, especially if I have PTSD over these things, then I will feel that threat coming up potentially in the environment around me and will seek to defend myself. Now, the conscious part of the mind, which is the prefrontal cortex, checks to see if the amygdala's feeling that there is a threat, whether that's true. So take something like a tarantula or some poisonous deadly spider, whatever it might be, or a snake, or any of those things which have been a threat to humans in our epigenetic past. Epigenetic meaning the genes that I've inherited from my ancestors. So I'd be walking through the forest at night and getting a little bit nervous that I don't have a light and it's also dark, and going through an area where a cobweb hits my face, but I've got a fear of spiders, so I actually think there's a spider on my face rather than just a cobweb. And immediately as soon as the threat hits, I think spider and react. I pull the cobweb away and discover it's actually just a cobweb, not a living spider that's about to bite my nose. And then the conscious mind is able to send a message to the amygdala to say, this isn't actually a threat, stand down from the violent reaction. So it takes a second for the mind to get its visual information to say, this is only a cobweb, not a spider. And then the mind is able to calm down the amygdala, who for that whole second has already gone into fight or flight mode. So apply that to relationships. When I begin to feel that this relationship that I was trusting is actually hiding a veiled threat, and that threat is now coming to the surface. And so my whole chemical equation goes from oxytocin love protection into oxytocin fear protection. So this is the link between fear or love. And I'm just finding it fascinating that that judgment of whether this is fear or love, that's appropriate response, is going on a level that is immediate inside in the subconscious mind. And the conscious mind is sitting on top of the subconscious mind, like the prefrontal cortex is sitting on top of the rest of the brain. So I find in myself, I have conversations going on in my mind between my prefrontal cortex and my amygdala. So I have PTSD because I have been through traumatic experiences. And post-traumatic stress disorder is the idea that the vagus nerve and the amygdala are always on guard because this has happened before, that this might happen again. So the inner image is there of what happened before that has not been healed. And if there's a threat that that might be happening again, then that image comes up so that this time I can act faster to defend myself before I get traumatized, re-traumatized. So another idea with this is another bit of science that I was listening to is all about surgeries. So if one has been through a surgery, open heart surgery or whatever it may be, it turns out that after the surgery, if immediately rehabilitation begins, then it's much more likely that you'll heal better. But if a few weeks go by before you start the healing process, it's less likely that any of the healing is going to be effective, and you're going to have trauma that is grown into your flesh. And the idea here is that if you re-traumatize the place that's traumatized, so I have a wound, and if that wound gets opened up again, then all the unhealed trauma comes up again in the psychology and in the chemistry in the brain. So if a trauma is re-triggered, and then this time a healing occurs rather than a denial or a not even noticing or a just going into fight or flight mode. If one can heal the fight or flight reaction and perceive that what's happening now isn't actually a recurrence of what happened in the past, it's actually a healing thing where what happened in the past has come up for me, but I'm actually scared of shadows. And rather than judging the person as a threat and then attacking them and then having to justify your attack and then it all ends up in court kind of idea, to be judged by an arbiter. What was traumatized, if dealt with in a healing manner, that's how we can heal the original traumas. So it's a natural thing, like with fevers. The fever is actually helping you to fully heal. And if you suppress the fever, then you won't heal so well. The same with emotional traumas that come up from past experiences that keep recurring traumas, where we're sort of expecting it will happen again, and sometimes we can be jumping at shadows and accusing somebody of doing something that isn't happening at all. And if we can catch ourselves doing that and be able to consciously recognize that what's happening now isn't actually a spider, it's just a cobweb. It's not a threat, it's actually harmless. This isn't really happening now, I'm projecting it onto the now because I'm triggered. And all the triggers is what I'm saying is the chemicals in our brains functioning. So I'm finding in my own experience over this last year, for everything that I've been traumatized with my life that came up around family stuff in the last year or two after my dad died, with my brothers and sisters and all those people. It brought up loads of traumas that I didn't even remember from my childhood. And over this last year or two, rather than just reacting to it with fear and fighting my brothers, I was able to recognize this must be deeper than this, and rather than just hate my brothers for what they seem to be doing, try to see it from their point of view of why they're doing this. And what I came to understand there, that my brothers weren't particularly picking on me. They actually saw me as a danger to my mother, and I saw them as a danger to my mother. And really it was their oxytocin versus my oxytocin, all of us thinking that we're protecting the mother, and therefore we must fight each other for which one is not a danger to be the one to succeed. So imagine seeing something like the conflict that's going on in the Middle East, that's in everybody's mind for the last 2 months, because the barbarity, to use that word, is so extreme. And the sides are so mixed matched in terms of military might and all that kind of stuff. There are all the outer justifications for why that war is going on, but neither side is going to ever win unless one side completely wipes out all the enemy. So the Palestinians or the Hamas are never going to wipe out all the Israelis, and the Israelis are never going to wipe out all of the Palestinians. And even if they did manage to wipe out all the Palestinians, they'd have to wipe out everyone else in the world who's judging them for being murdered. So there's no end to that conflict simply by continuing to fight. And what's being fought about is all epigenetic ancestral stuff over who's got the right to the land type of thing, who's been there the longest kind of thing, who was there first kind of thing. And again, none of that can actually be solved in the present by, well, we were here first, so everybody has to agree that we can stay, whichever side makes that claim. But yeah, it's a disturbing and weird idea to look at conflict like that and see it from the point of view of oxytocin and epigenetic past rather than anything that's justifiable. And this is all looking into the idea, therefore, that there is no such thing as justice. That justice is to do with judgment, and judgment is to do with a lack of comprehension of understanding why is this happening at all. So it's a lack of information where two sets of fractions are fighting against each other and someone can judge, well, which one is more right than the other. But neither are completely right. So the idea that you can punish someone else in order to fix something that's gone wrong. So a murder happens, and to murder the murderer actually just creates more murderers, kind of thing. So again, being able to look at this as chemical reactions happening in humanity over generations and generations and generations as part of our evolution. It's just a different way of looking at it rather than just agreeing with judgment that the justice system, which is keeping a whole load of people suppressed while an elite are living above the law. So the justice system isn't working, and bringing that down to even in our own lives, judgment is a self-defense mechanism. It doesn't make it wrong, but it also doesn't make it right. So back to the idea around oxytocin and a newborn baby. A newborn baby is sinless, has done nothing worthy of being judged. Everyone is born innocent, essentially. We may be all born with some sort of a karma of our environment, and that environment is going to shape how we turn out to be. And it may well be that if you live in a society and a family in which brutality is going on, then you'll be brutalized, kind of thing, and you'll end up doing things which are guilt-ridden. Yes.
I'm hungry.
Okay. Here, let me just turn off this recording here and I'll go and get food.
It's warm.